The following is a paid party political broadcast on behalf of the Libertarianz Party. On February 22nd, 2011, at 12:51 p.m, Christchurch was rocked by a devastating earthquake which killed 181 people. It left a large chunk of the city in ruins. This followed on from the destructive September earthquake and thousands of aftershocks. Immediately, Christchurch locals, along with emergency services from within New Zealand and internationally, responded swiftly to help the search and recovery. This represented human nature at its best, with neighbour helping neighbour and strangers helping anyone in need. However, this natural disaster has been compounded by a government disaster. The government's overbearing and incompetent response has destroyed livelihoods, created uncertainty, and removed property rights. The Christchurch City Council and Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority's management of the rehabilitation phase of the earthquake has locked off for 9 months and counting the entire central business district of a once thriving city, an unprecedented action in any disaster worldwide. The 20-year plan to redevelop Christchurch imposes excessive costs on a crippled city and a depressed economy. Private enterprise is overridden by rules, plans and regulations, highlighting in the most vivid manner the effects an overbearing government has on an economy. Today, Libertarians are talking to Christchurch business owners, an engineer and an economist about the government's roadblock to Christchurch's recovery.
Hello, my name is Nikki Arts. I have a building company in conjunction with my brother in High Street, which is opposite the Polytechnic Jazz School, and we have a mail order card making business, or we had a business. We no longer do. I've been locked out since the 22nd of February.
Yes, well, I'm a Warwick, Derby Menswear. We've been trading in Manchester Street in the CBD for the best part of 50 years, 49 years precisely. Happened to be in there on the 22nd of February by my wife and I, also a director, and at 6 minutes to 1, all hell broke loose. The front of the shop fell out in the street, a cloud of dust, and all the dusty mortar of something like 135 years filled the shop.
Immediately aiding people, rescuing people, of course it was great. It was necessary and great. Since then I think it's become a big bureaucracy, struggle for power, Sarah versus, which is the government, versus the city council versus civil defence. I think it's just a power play. And unfortunately, from the business owners and building owners' point of view, it's helped us not at all.
Since the February earthquake, of course, the civil defence wouldn't allow access. It was sealed from cordon. You couldn't get access. The whole area was shut down.
We had 10 days in May where we were allowed to do emergency repairs, and we had to crawl over broken glass to get that access. And we've had intermittent access since then. Most of our stuff we got out, accounts, computers, we got out by sneaking in one night, because that was the only way I could get the February invoices. We were desperate to get that month invoiced. I couldn't get access. No one would let us in, so we climbed in.
And we were able to get in through an engineer who was able to help us get access to get vital records. And then we were able to get in a fortnight later to get some further records that we had overlooked the previous time. But apart from that, it was sealed off with two security fences preventing any access at all.
I mean, we don't understand why no one has come to us and said, "Oh, back of your factory's fine, why don't we lock it off here, plug your power in and let you get going." There is no reason why our business can't be operating, and we are in free fall.
I could have had access to recover quite an amount of the merchandise and fittings, but I was prevented from doing so. I was quite indignant about that. And as a result of that, there was a feeling amongst the business community that business owners' views and concerns weren't being heard.
All I do is spend my days fighting with Sarah, trying to get access, trying to get a stupid little hole in the wall fixed. And it is a stupid little hole in the wall.
So I did want access to get one or two things out. Some of the two important things, heirlooms and things that we've had for 49 years. And they gave us what turned out to be an hour with myself and two helpers to get in and get a few things out, which did happen. We got a few things, but really when you've got a business that's been going 49 years with heirlooms, and we've got 6,500 product lines in an hour with two helpers, where lots of things had fallen down, impeding access and impeding movement through the premises, it was a bit difficult.
Any communication I've instigated, and it's usually been kind of angry.
There are a huge number of people though who just had their businesses destroyed because they could not get in there. Now, yes, there was some danger, but relatively minor danger, and it's a risk that every individual within reason should have been allowed to make a call on themselves. You know, every situation was different, and having a one rule fits all just doesn't work in that situation. You know, make them sign a disclaimer that if they kill themselves then they can't sue anyone, you know, whatever. But, you know, let individuals assess the risk themselves. Should have been the approach.
The other thing that's caused us major problems is we got a 10-day notice, the dreaded Section 38, which is the demolish and make repairs or make safe within 10 days. That 10 days is 10 days, it's not 10 working days. You've got 10 days to do it, and I might get this slightly wrong, site safety plan, road management plan, waste minimisation plan, resource consent, building consent. Now, I don't know about you, but it's taken us, we've been working on our earthquake strengthening project for 18 months. How the hell are you supposed to do that in 10 days? I have no idea. I've had to employ a project manager, which is Hawkins Construction, to oversee the repairs of the building because I've been told that I'm not allowed to project manage it myself. The fact that we've been project managing for the last 18 months the earthquake strengthening appears to be irrelevant, and Hawkins is just clipping, sorry Hawkins, but you're just clipping the ticket, and that really annoys me.
It was a letter from Sarah to say that there was under Section 39 of the Sarah Act they are going to demolish our building, and that they would demolish the building and send an account to me for the costs. I explained to them through an email that I had an owner-initiated contract let to demolish the building, that it was a set quote, but they said that while we had got an owner-initiated quote, they wouldn't acknowledge that Sarah were going to handle the demolition, but they would allow our contractor to do the work, but it would be done through them, and they would be the ones that would be sending an account to me for this for the costs. We've got an account just recently from Sarah addressed to me using an incorrect Christian name and an incorrect surname, sending me a bill for exactly twice the amount that I was quoted from the independent contractor.
And I'm just stymied by red tape, paperwork, Sarah. They're insane. They don't understand. They've got no economic nous at all. I don't know. Frustration is the main, well, our main problem. Frustration, angry. Don't know what we're going to do. I'm about to start looking for a new job. Be doubtful if we're going to survive, basically. Well, it's looking like it's going to be 12 months. I don't blame my customers if they go somewhere else. I don't think we can survive. I haven't been paid for, how long now? February? There are no wages coming in. I'm not entitled to the dole because supposedly we have BI, business interruption insurance. That's a joke. I think the accountants made more out of that. I'm sorry, Alistair. More out of that than we have. How are we supposed to live? I think, personally, that we're entitled to compensation because we've been compulsorily locked out. And I kind of think that some recompense is actually required because I'd much rather be working. I hate this. I'd much rather be able to plug my plant in and start to supply my customers.
The earthquake itself gave a fair bit of uncertainty for Christchurch businesses trying to decide how to invest going forward. That's been compounded by actions of council and others in making it really unclear what the rules are going to be going forward, whether property owners are going to be able to continue to use their property in the way that they'd wanted to or that they'd planned on. And that makes it harder for Christchurch business owners to decide that they want to continue to invest in Christchurch. One of the best things that council could do is just kind of get out of the way. Let business owners use their property as they'd like to and not come up with kind of harebrained schemes like some of the city plan is. One of the last things that I would want to see if I were deciding to rebuild would be grandiose schemes for precincts and building heights and multi-million or possibly billion-dollar light rail schemes that would be exceedingly expensive for me as part of the property tax burden and would make it very difficult for me to plan my rebuild. I'd be sorely tempted to take my money and go elsewhere facing those kinds of constraints.
The building owners are not going to have the money to be able to build these flash plans that the council has put forward, lovely green buildings, pretty designs. They've only got indemnity value for their buildings. Why would they, or how can they build flash green buildings? And what they also haven't understood is, I own that patch of land in High Street. Now if I want to put up a concrete tilt slab, I'll damn well do it. I'm not planning to, but the other building owners, that's their right. I don't quite work out, they don't seem to understand who actually owns the land, and they need to get their rentals.
The property owner should have the final and the most vital say as to what they want on their property.
They've suggested that owners of buildings that were taller than 7 stories would be grandfathered in and would be allowed to rebuild to a higher height. But who's to say that the land that they were on is the best suited for having that type of building to start with? They might want to rebuild on another part of town and have a tall building. It would be somewhat perverse if the only places that were allowed to rebuild to beyond a 7-story limit were the places where tall buildings fell over previously. That might not be the best land for it. We don't see San Francisco having banned tall buildings after earthquakes. We see people were happy to move back into them. They'd want some assurance that they're strong buildings. It's then a little odd that the regulations for going from a 6-story to a 7-story building depend on it being green enough rather than being earthquake strengthened enough. Council seems more to be getting in the way of redevelopment. And who is council to say that people wouldn't want to be in tall buildings anymore? It's not their skin in the game. A business owner who decides to build a tall building is doing it because he expects that people want to live and work there, or be living at renting accommodation in a hotel in that space. We would expect that property owners with their own money on the line would have better expectations about people's willingness to be in those properties than would council.
They're bulldozing everything. They haven't understood that it's cheaper to repair the unreinforced masonry buildings like ours. It's cheaper to repair it than it is to pull it down. I mean, we've proved it. Our building's still standing, and it's standing well, barring a hole in the wall. To repair that building, I mean, the earthquake strengthening's cost us around about $300,000. The building itself is probably worth the guts of $1 million. To pull it down and rebuild it, it's going to be a heck of a lot more than $1 million. It's cheaper to repair it. The engineer from Japan has said exactly the same thing about a week ago. It barely made a mention in the newspaper. Nobody wants to talk about it. They haven't brought in any overseas experts. They've put the army in control of a recovery phase. They have no business experience at all. They've put no one in with any economic understanding of what's going on. The treatment of the small and medium enterprises like us has been appalling.
I also would have hoped that there would have been more talk about opening up property on the edges of town for the folks in red zones who can't rebuild on their own land. What's somebody supposed to do in a house that's been condemned and they're being bought up by the national government to not rebuild there, but no other land has been opened up for development yet.
I think they just need to free up land. Okay? I'm a civil engineer, an engineering consultant. I work for a variety of clients, one of them being a property developer in Christchurch, and I've also done some small-scale subdivision development of my own. I know the extent to which land is tied up and how you do have to navigate yourself through this hugely complicated path to get a consent to develop land.
Council could be putting forward Christchurch as a good place to be doing business, showing that they respect the wishes of property owners downtown, easing up things in the suburbs and trying to encourage new people to come in. I don't know why there isn't been some business development zone open up near the airport and wave a big flag for IKEA saying, guys, Wellington and Auckland told you to go away under RMA constraints because there'd be too much traffic. We want you. Please, come, set up. We're not going to get in your way.
A key thing in Christchurch is the limitations imposed by the airport. There is what's called a 50 decibel noise limit, which covers a huge swathe of land, starting from about here. We're right on Memorial Avenue towards the airport. It starts around about here, goes about 5 kilometres to the west. It extends about 15 to 20 kilometres down towards Rolleston, and about 15 to 20 kilometres north towards and including Kaipoi. And all of that land is locked up. It cannot be developed. It cannot get a consent to be developed. The airport is concerned that if they allow development in that area, one day in the future when the airport grows and they might want more night flights, that people might object to the airport's operations. So the council own the airport, and they have succeeded in saying we're just not going to allow any development in that entire area.
Where will people live? Where should we be rebuilding? If they just eased up on minimum lot sizes on the edges of town, people could decide for themselves. We wouldn't have to be figuring out where to put people. People would figure it out for themselves. Property developers would be figuring it out.
What they need to do is just free it up, let the market develop what land needs to be developed. There'll be different developers competing. I mean, this land here, for instance, the land affected by the noise contours, I mean, I have a very simple solution to that. Establish whether the airport do have a right to operate 24 hours, and if they do, establish that, make it known, and then it's up to developers to decide whether they want to develop that land that might be noise affected. Assuming you're zoned residential in the first place, it can take up to 2 to 3 years to get all the consents you need. If you're not zoned residential, for instance this land here, then you'll never get it. When you can get a consent, I mean it's a process, and it's very long and it's very costly, but you know at the end that in likelihood you will be able to develop that land and you just build the cost into it.
Now is the time when we should be doing things like easing back on some of the regulations that made it hard to do business here, opening things up on the green zone, easing up on some of the height restrictions and density restrictions.
And the unpredictability is the big thing. If you're a developer, you've got to sink a huge amount of money into this whole consenting process. You may or may not get consent, but for years on end you've got to throw hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions, towards something that may or may not come off. Now if it does come off, you need to make a hell of a lot of money to justify that investment, and that certainly drives up the prices.
The proposed light rail system, even the small segment of it at about $400 million, that works out if they're borrowing money to fund it at about 4% interest, that's about $70,000 a day just on the capital cost. The entire red bus system gets about 15,000 passengers per day. You'd end up then needing for about 7,000 passengers a day on one light rail track to have a $10 per passenger fee just to cover the capital charge, never mind the operating and maintenance charges. It would be surprising if a single light rail line could take about 45% of the capacity of the entire red bus network to get it down to a $10 per passenger charge, which would either have to be covered by a ticket fee, which means nobody would ride it, or it'd be built into my property tax rates. And again, that makes it less likely that people would want to stay.
That is where we go from here. Well, Kobe in Japan, 1995, it took 10 to 15 years before their economy had even got to the pre-earthquake level. I can see exactly the same thing happening here, and the level of destruction going on here is more significant than happened in Kobe. Nobody in the world has demolished up to 50% of their CBD, and nobody has ever locked it out like this. This is crazy. We can't repair our buildings. They won't let us in to repair our buildings. We've been struggling since February to be let in to repair our buildings. I've got a steel post lying on the ground at the moment, waiting to prop up the front corner of my building.
We should also note the fantastic efforts of some Christchurch entrepreneurs who have done wonderful things despite the earthquakes. A new brew pub opened up 1 week after the June earthquakes down at the Castles and Sons. I was amazed they were able to do it. They just buckled down, worked hard, and it's very successful. There's another bunch of entrepreneurs, Christchurch's IT community, who recognized that they needed to get together and work a little harder together and site themselves downtown again. They put that together, came up with a plan of how to develop, and then went to council to talk to them about where they might be able to locate themselves. That's the kind of approach that works. The entrepreneurs got together first. They recognized that they'd work well as a team. That recognizes the kind of agglomeration effects that the city should be trying to promote. But they did it themselves, and it emerged because they recognized that it was of value. Council should be focusing more on trying to encourage folks like Epic to come in, coordinate amongst themselves, and set up downtown again, rather than coming up with grandiose schemes of how they would plop an arts precinct here, some other precinct there, and then try and find people to shoehorn into them. Let it emerge spontaneously.
So we're left with a building which, a block of land in CBD, which to all intents and purposes will probably take a year, 18 months, even 2 years before some plans can be established, before it can be wise to get any building underway.
They say there's a lot of ruin in a city. People usually read that the wrong way, though, imagining that it talks about cities being cesspools and bad things. I think it should properly be understood as meaning that it takes a lot to break a city. Cities are resilient. The people in cities have a lot of capacity to get around silly things. But after some serious ruin like an earthquake, we can't afford a lot of silly stuff coming out of council. Christchurch's council hasn't always been the one that's been most open for business, and we could afford a lot of that because of just how great the place is before. It's a wonderful place to live, just natural amenities here, so we could afford to have some silliness built into it. Now that we have to be struggling to keep people here, we can't afford that anymore.
Access and power, that's all I need.
New Zealand can ill afford increasing taxes or forced levies to help its second biggest city back on its feet, as if it were just another welfare case. Such a drain on individual resources would finish us off as a first world nation and deny the industry and expertise contained and presently lying shackled within the city itself. The government is injecting billions of taxpayers' dollars into Christchurch's recovery. However, this is just taking money from one group, trying to survive the economic downturn, to give to another, trying to build an earthquake recovery. It is a recipe for long-term and possibly permanent stagnation. For the good of Christchurch and New Zealand, our government must readdress their thinking on state-mandated economic stimulus. It has already failed around the world where it has been tried, and with the unique problems that Christchurch faces, it is failing again. But now it will take the rest of New Zealand with it. If we are to make the best of a bad situation, government must have a massive rethink and realise that neither rebuilding nor recovery requires sacrifices from anybody. What it requires is that government reconfigure itself into a morale-boosting and motivating force, as well as protecting property rights. As we have already seen, when put to the test, New Zealanders are very resourceful and are very quick to help when others are suffering. In the long term, this is our chance to shine. We do not need our government to shine at our expense. Rather than simply expanding the machinery of wealth redistribution to another round of class warfare, Rather than expanding and raising again all existing hurdles to growth and economic progress, it would be far better to remove hurdles altogether and allow wealth to transfer freely and voluntarily.
Libertarian's policy is to make Christchurch an enterprise zone instead of a ward of the state.
Christchurch must attract resources. Grant Christchurch a complete 10-year tax-free status to be extended at discretion. Do this and the problem of attracting resources will disappear. The aim is to shift away from a coercive patch job to bringing about a freewheeling environment of entrepreneurial opportunity. Christchurch needs thousands of new and rebuilt homes. Our government should take immediate steps to remove the bureaucratic hurdles that have stifled growth and rebuilding, and has made affordable houses unaffordable. This includes the regulatory system of permits and inspections. Let those who own their own property determine between them and their insurance company what they wish their building standards to be. Building is productive. Letting things lie idle while waiting for permission from people who have no genuine interest is not. Cantabrians don't need bureaucrats breathing down their necks. Make Christchurch an emissions trading scheme and resource management act free zone. Cantabrians don't need to be told where and how they will rebuild their city. They don't need another centrally planned workers' paradise. Bust the town planners out of Christchurch permanently and allow the city to reinvent itself spontaneously. Cantabrians don't need barriers to employment, so we would remove the minimum wage. In a situation like Christchurch's, it's better to be earning something than nothing at all, and it's better to be achieving something with the diminished resources available than achieving nothing at all. Consenting adults will come to their own voluntary financial agreements. We have two polar directions in which to take things from here, either central planning or the unleashing of spontaneous order. Central planning allows vested interests to prevail, taking us down the road to third world status. Allowing this would be a grievous mistake for which all New Zealanders will pay dearly now, as will generations that follow. After every tragedy, our preconceptions about human nature are re-evaluated. We realise the benevolence and strength of the average human being, and we've seen the power of voluntary cooperation even in the face of disaster.
Let's unleash the power of spontaneous order and produce a new city, the likes of which no one presently thinks possible.
Mr. Brownie tea dance is full.